Audio Renaissance presents Social Intelligence, the New Science of Human Relationships by Daniel Goleman. Read for you by Dennis Boutsikaris. Part 1. Wired to Connect. Prologue. Unveiling a New Science. During the early days of the Second American invasion of Iraq, a group of soldiers set out for a local mosque to contact the town's chief cleric. Their goal was to ask his help in organizing the distribution of relief supplies. But a mob gathered, fearing the soldiers were coming to arrest their spiritual leader or destroy the mosque, a holy shrine. Hundreds of devout Muslims surrounded the soldiers, waving their hands in the air and shouting as they pressed in toward the heavily armed platoon. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Hughes, thought fast. Picking up a loudspeaker, he told his soldiers to take a knee, meaning to kneel on one knee. Next, he ordered them to point their rifles toward the ground. Then his order was, "Smile!" At that, the crowd's mood morphed. A few people were still yelling, but most were now smiling in return. A few patted the soldiers on the back as Hughes ordered them to walk slowly away, backward, still smiling. That quick-witted move was the culmination of a dizzying array of split-second social calculations. Hughes had to read the level of hostility in that crowd and sense what would calm them. He had to bet on the discipline of his men and the strength of their trust in him. And he had to gamble on hitting just the right gesture that would pierce the barriers of language and culture, all culminating in those spur-of-the-moment decisions. That well-calibrated forcefulness, combined with adeptness at reading people, distinguishes outstanding law enforcement officers, and certainly military officers dealing with agitated civilians. Whatever one's feelings about the military campaign itself, that incident spotlights the brain's social brilliance even in a chaotic, tense encounter. What carried Hughes through that tight spot were the same neural circuits that we rely on when we encounter a potentially sinister stranger and decide instantly whether to run or engage. This interpersonal radar has saved countless people over human history, and it remains crucial to our survival even today. In a less urgent mode, our brain's social circuits navigate us through every encounter, whether in the classroom, the bedroom, or on the sales floor. These circuits are at play when lovers meet eyes and kiss for the first time, or when tears held back are sensed nonetheless. They account for the glow of a talk with a friend where we feel nourished. This neural system operates in any interaction where tuning and timing are crucial. They give a lawyer the certainty that he wants that person on a jury, a negotiator the gut sense that this is the other party's final offer, a patient the feeling she can trust her physician. It accounts for that magic in a meeting where everyone stops shuffling papers, quiets down, and locks in on what someone is saying. And now science can detail the neural mechanics at work in such moments. The Sociable Brain. In this book, I aim to lift the curtain on an emerging science, one that almost daily reveals startling insights into our interpersonal world. The most fundamental discovery of this new discipline: we are wired to connect. Neuroscience has discovered that our brain's very design makes it sociable, inexorably drawn into an intimate brain-to-brain link-up whenever we engage with another person. That neural bridge lets us affect the brain, and so the body, of everyone we interact with, just as they do us. Even our most routine encounters act as regulators in the brain, priming our emotions, some desirable, others not. The more strongly connected we are with someone emotionally, the greater the mutual force. Our most potent exchanges occur with those people with whom we spend the greatest amount of time day in and day out, year after year, particularly those we care about the most. During these neural link-ups, our brains engage in an emotional tango, a dance of feelings. Our social interactions operate as modulators, something like interpersonal thermostats that continually reset key aspects of our brain function as they orchestrate our emotions. The resulting feelings have far-reaching consequences that ripple throughout our body, sending out cascades of hormones that regulate biological systems from our heart to our immune cells. Perhaps most astonishing, science now tracks connections between the most stressful relationships and the operation of specific genes that regulate the immune system. To a surprising extent, then, our relationships mold not just our experience, but our biology. The brain-to-brain link allows our strongest relationships to shape us on matters as benign as whether we laugh at the same jokes or as profound as which genes are or are not activated in T cells, the immune system's foot soldiers in the constant battle against invading bacteria and viruses. That link is a double-edged sword. Nourishing relationships have a beneficial impact on our health, while toxic ones can act like slow poison in our bodies. Virtually all the major scientific discoveries I draw on in this volume have emerged since emotional intelligence appeared in 1995, and they continue to surface at a quickening pace. When I wrote Emotional Intelligence, my focus was on a crucial set of human capacities within us as individuals, our ability to manage our own emotions and our inner potential for positive relationships. Here, the picture enlarges beyond a one-person psychology, those capacities an individual has within, to a two-person psychology, what transpires as we connect. I intend this book to be a companion volume to Emotional Intelligence, exploring the same terrain of human life from a different vantage point, one that allows a wider swath of understanding of our personal world. The spotlight shifts to those ephemeral moments that emerge as we interact. These take on deep consequence as we realize how, through their sum total, we create one another. Our inquiry speaks to questions like, what makes a psychopath dangerously manipulative? Can we do a better job of helping our children grow up to be happy? What makes a marriage a nourishing base? Can relationships buffer us from disease? Can a teacher or leader enable the brains of students or workers to do their best? How can groups riven by hatred come to live together in peace? And what do these insights suggest for the kind of society we are able to build, and for what really matters in each of our lives? Social corrosion. Today, just as science reveals how crucially important nourishing relationships are, human connections seem increasingly under siege. Social corrosion has many faces. A kindergarten teacher in Texas asks a 6-year-old girl to put her toys away, and she launches into full tantrum mode, screaming and knocking over her chair, then crawling under the teacher's desk and kicking so hard the drawers spill out. Her outburst marks an epidemic of such incidents of wildness among kindergartners, all documented in a single school district in Fort Worth, Texas. The blow-ups occurred not just among the poor students, but among better-off ones as well. Some explain the spike in violence among the very young as due to economic stress that makes parents work longer, so that children spend hours after school in daycare, or alone, and parents come home with a hair trigger for exasperation. Others point to data showing that even as toddlers, 40% of American 2-year-olds watch TV for at least 3 hours a day, hours they are not interacting with people who can help them learn to get along better. The more TV they watch, the more unruly they are by school age. In a German city, a motorcyclist gets thrown onto the roadway in a collision. He lies on the pavement, unmoving. Pedestrians walk right by, and drivers gaze at him while they wait for the light to change. But no one stops to help. Finally, after 15 long minutes, a passenger in a car that is stopped for the light rolls down a window and asks the motorcyclist if he's been hurt, offering to call for help on a cell phone. When the incident is telecast by the station that has staged the accident, there is a sense of scandal. In Germany, everyone who has a driver's license has been trained in emergency first aid precisely for moments like this. As a German emergency room physician comments, people just walk away when they see others in danger. They don't seem to care. In 2003, single-person households became the most common living arrangement in the United States. And while once families would gather together in the evening, now children, parents, and spouses find it increasingly difficult to spend time together. Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam's acclaimed analysis of the fraying American social fabric, pointed to a 2-decade decline in social capital. One way such capital can be gauged for a society is the number of public meetings held and club memberships maintained. While in the 1970s, 2/3 of Americans belonged to organizations with regular meetings that they attended, that number had dropped to around 1/3 by the 1990s. These numbers, Putnam argued, reflected a loss of human connection in American society. Since then, a new kind of organization has mushroomed from just 8,000 in the 1950s to more than 20,000 by the end of the 1990s. But unlike the old clubs, with their face-to-face meetings and ongoing social web, these new organizations keep people at a distance. Membership comes via email or mass mailings, and the main activity boils down to sending money, not getting together. Then there are the unknowns in the ways humans around the world are connecting and disconnecting as technology offers more varieties of nominal communication in actual isolation. These trends all signal the slow vanishing of opportunities for people to connect. This inexorable techno-creep is so insidious that no one has yet calculated its social and emotional costs. Creeping disconnection. Regard the plight of Rosie Garcia, who manages one of the busiest bakeries anywhere, the Hot and Crusty in New York City's Grand Central Station. The throngs of commuters passing through the station ensure that on any working day, long lines of customers will be waiting to place their order. But Rosie finds that more and more of the customers she waits on seem utterly distracted, staring vacantly into space. She'll say, "Can I help you?" and they notice nothing. She'll repeat, "Can I help you?" and they pay no attention. Shouting, "Can I help you?" usually breaks through to them. It's not that Rosie's customers are deaf. It's that their ears are stuffed with too little headphones from an iPod. They're dazed, lost in any of scads of tunes on their personalized playlist, oblivious to what's going on around them, and, more to the point, tuned out to everyone they go by. Of course, long before the iPod, the Walkman, and the cell phone cauterized people walking down the street, blocking off raw contact with the bustle of life, the auto, a mode of passing through a public space utterly insulated by wraparound glass, a half-ton or more of steel, and the lulling sound of a radio, started the process. Before the auto became commonplace, typical modes of travel, from walking or being pulled along by a horse to riding a bullock cart, kept travelers in easy proximity to the human world around them. The one-person shell created by headphones intensifies social insulation. Even when the wearer has a one-on-one, face-to-face encounter, the sealed ears offer a ready excuse to treat the other person as an object, something to navigate around rather than someone to acknowledge, or, at the very least, notice. While life as a pedestrian offers the chance to greet someone approaching, or spend a few minutes chatting with a friend, the iPod wearer can readily ignore anyone, looking right through them in a universal snub. To be sure, from the iPod wearer's perspective, he is relating to someone, the singer, the band, or the orchestra plugged into his ears. His heart beats as one with theirs. But these virtual others have nothing whatever to do with the people who are just a foot or two away, to whose existence the rapt listener has become largely indifferent. To the extent that technology absorbs people in a virtual reality, it deadens them to those who are actually nearby. The resulting social autism adds to the ongoing list of unintended human consequences of the continuing invasion of technology into our daily lives. Constant digital connectivity means that even when we're on vacation, work stalks us. A survey of American workers found during their vacation time 34% check in with their office so much that they come back as stressed, or more so, than they were when they left. Email and cell phones penetrate essential barriers around private time and family life. The cell phone can ring on a picnic with the kids, and even at home, mom or dad can be absent from the family as they diligently go through their email every evening. Of course, the kids don't really notice. They're fixated on their own email, a web game, or the TV screen in their bedroom. A French report of a worldwide survey of 2.5 billion viewers in 72 countries revealed that in 2004, people spent an average of 3 hours and 39 minutes each day watching television. Japan was highest, with 4 hours and 25 minutes, and the United States came in a close second. Television, as the poet T.S. Eliot warned in 1963, when the then new medium was spreading into homes, permits millions of people to listen to the same joke at the same time and yet remain lonesome. The internet and email have the same impact. A survey of 4,830 people in the United States found that for many, the internet has replaced television as the way free time gets used. The math: for every hour people spent using the internet, their face-to-face contact with friends, coworkers, and family fell by 24 minutes. We stay in touch at arm's length. As the Internet study leader Norman Nye, director of the Stanford Institute for the Quantitative Study of Society, put it, you can't get a hug or a kiss over the Internet. Social neuroscience. This book unveils eye-opening findings from the emerging field of social neuroscience. Yet when I started research for this book, I did not know that that field existed. Initially, my eye was caught by a scholarly article here, a news clip there, all pointing to a sharper scientific understanding of the neural dynamics of human relationships. A newly discovered class of neuron, the spindle cell, acts the most rapidly of any, guiding snap social decisions for us, and has proven to be more plentiful in the human brain than in any other species. A different variety of brain cells, mirror neurons, sense both the move another person is about to make and their feelings, instantaneously prepare us to imitate that movement and feel with them. When the eyes of a woman that a man finds attractive look directly at him, his brain secretes the pleasure-inducing chemical dopamine, but not when she looks elsewhere. Each of these findings offered an isolated snapshot of the workings of the social brain, the neural circuitry that operates as we interact. None in itself told the whole story, but as they accumulated, the outlines of a major new discipline became visible. Only long after I started to track these isolated dots did I understand the hidden pattern that connects them all. I chanced upon the name for this field, social neuroscience, when reading about a scientific conference that had been held on the topic in Sweden in 2003. Searching for the origins of the term social neuroscience, the earliest use I found was in the early 1990s by psychologists John Cacioppo and Gary Bernstein, who back then were lone prophets of this brave new science. When I spoke with Cacioppo recently, he recalled, there was a lot of skepticism among neuroscientists about studying anything outside the cranium. 20th century neuroscience thought social behavior was just too complex to study. Today, Cacioppo adds, we can start to make sense of how the brain drives social behavior, and in turn, how our social world influences our brain and biology. Now director of the Center for Cognitive and Social Neuroscience at the University of Chicago, Cacioppo has witnessed a sea change. This field has become a hot scientific topic for the 21st century. This new field has already begun solving some older scientific puzzles. For instance, some of Cacioppo's initial research uncovered links between involvement in a distressing relationship and hikes in stress hormones to levels that damage certain genes that control cells that fight viruses. A missing piece in that trajectory had been the neural pathways that could convert relationship troubles into such biological consequences, one focus of social neuroscience. The emblematic research partnership in this new field is between psychologists and neuroscientists who are jointly using the functional MRI, or fMRI, a brain imaging machine that, until now, was usually devoted to making clinical diagnoses in hospitals. The MRI uses powerful magnets to render an astonishingly detailed depiction of the brain. Insiders actually call MRIs magnets, as in, our lab has 3 magnets. The fMRI adds massive computing power that yields the equivalent of a video, showing what parts of the brain light up during a human moment like hearing the voice of an old friend. From such studies are flowing answers to questions like, what happens in the brain of a person who is gazing at her lover, or of someone gripped by bigotry, or of someone plotting how to win a competitive game? The social brain is the sum of the neural mechanisms that orchestrate our interactions as well as our thoughts and feelings about people and our relationships. The most telling news here may be that the social brain represents the only biological system in our bodies that continually attunes us to, and in turn becomes influenced by, the internal state of the people we're with. All other biological systems, from our lymphatic glands to our spleen, mainly regulate their activity in response to signals emerging from within the body, not beyond our skin. The pathways of the social brain are unique in their sensitivity to the world at large. Whenever we connect face-to-face, or voice-to-voice or skin-to-skin, with someone else, our social brains interlock. Our social interactions even play a role in reshaping our brain through neuroplasticity, which means that repeated experiences sculpt the shape, size, and number of neurons and their synaptic connections. By repeatedly driving our brain into a given register, our key relationships can gradually mold certain neural circuitry. In effect, being chronically hurt and angered, or being emotionally nourished by someone we spend time with daily over the course of years, can refashion our brain. These new discoveries reveal that our relationships have subtle, yet powerful lifelong impacts on us. That news may be unwelcome for someone whose relationships tend toward the negative, but the same finding also points to reparative possibilities from our personal connections at any point in life. Thus, how we connect with others has unimagined significance. That brings us to what it might mean, in view of these new insights, to be intelligent about our social world. Acting wisely. Way back in 1920, just after the first burst of enthusiasm about then-new IQ tests, psychologist Edward Thorndike created the original formulation of social intelligence. One way he defined it was as the ability to understand and manage men and women, skills we all need to live well in the world. But that definition by itself also allows pure manipulation to be considered a mark of interpersonal talent. Even now, some descriptions of social intelligence offer no distinctions between the callow aptitudes of a con man and the genuinely caring acts that enrich healthy relationships. In my view, simply being manipulative, valuing only what works for one person at the expense of the other, should not be seen as socially intelligent. Instead, we might think of social intelligence as a shorthand term for being intelligent not just about our relationships, but also in them. This concept broadens the focus of social intelligence from a one-person view to a two-person perspective, from abilities within an individual to what emerges as a person engages in a relationship. Expanding our focus in this way lets us look beyond the individual to understand what actually transpires as people interact, and to look beyond narrow self-interest to the best interests of others, too. That more expanded view leads us to consider within the scope of social intelligence capacities that enrich personal relationships, like empathy and concern. So, in this book, I consider a second, wider principle that Thorndike also proposed for our social aptitude: acting wisely in human relationships. The social responsiveness of the brain demands that we be wise, that we realize how not just our own moods, but our very biology is being driven and molded by the other people in our lives. And in turn, it demands that we take stock of how we affect other people's emotions and biology. Indeed, we can take the measure of a relationship in terms of a person's impact on us and ours on them. The biological influence passing from person to person suggests a new dimension of a life well lived, conducting ourselves in ways that are beneficial even at this subtle level for those with whom we connect. Relationships themselves take on new meaning, and so we need think about them in a radically different way. The implications are of more than passing theoretical interest. They compel us to reevaluate how we live our lives. But before we explore these grand implications, let's go back to the beginning of this story. The surprising ease with which our brains interlock, spreading our emotions like a virus. Chapter 1. The Emotional Economy. One day, late for a meeting in Midtown Manhattan, I was looking for a shortcut. So I walked into an indoor atrium on the ground floor of a skyscraper, planning to use an exit door I had spotted on the other side that would give me a faster route through the block. But as soon as I reached the building's lobby, with its banks of elevators, a uniformed guard stormed over to me, waving his arms and yelling, "You can't walk through here!" "Why not?" I asked, puzzled. "Private property, it's private property," he shouted, visibly agitated. I seemed to have inadvertently intruded into an unmarked security zone. "It would help," I suggested in a shaky attempt to infuse a bit of reasoning, "if there were a sign on the door saying, 'Do not enter.'" My remark made him even angrier. Get out," he screamed. Unsettled, I hastily beat my retreat, his anger reverberating in my own gut for the next several blocks. When someone dumps their toxic feelings on us, explodes in anger or threats, shows disgust or contempt, they activate in us circuitry for those very same distressing emotions. Their act has potent neurological consequences. Emotions are contagious. We catch strong emotions much as we do a rhinovirus, and so can come down with the emotional equivalent of a cold. Every interaction has an emotional subtext. Along with whatever else we are doing, we can make each other feel a little better, or even a lot better, or a little worse, or a lot worse, as happened to me. Beyond what transpires in the moment, we can retain a mood that stays with us long after the direct encounter ends, an emotional afterglow, or afterglower in my case. These tacit transactions drive what amounts to an emotional economy, the net inner gains and losses we experience with a given person, or in a given conversation, or on any given day. By evening, the net balance of feelings we have exchanged largely determines what kind of day, good or bad, we feel we've had. We participate in this interpersonal economy whenever a social interaction results in a transfer of feeling, which is virtually always. Such interpersonal judo has countless variations, but they all come down to our ability to change another person's mood, and they ours. When I make you frown, I evoke in you a touch of worry. When you make me smile, I feel happy. In this clandestine exchange, emotions pass from person to person, from outside to inside, hopefully for the best. A downside of emotional contagion comes when we take on a toxic state simply by being around the wrong person at the wrong time. I was an unwitting victim of that security guard's fury. Like secondhand smoke, the leakage of emotions can make a bystander an innocent casualty of someone else's toxic state. In moments like mine with that guard, as we confront someone's anger, our brain automatically scans to see if it signals some further danger. The resulting hypervigilance is driven largely by the amygdala, an almond-shaped area in the midbrain that triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response to danger. Of the entire range of feeling, fear most powerfully arouses the amygdala. When it is driven by alarm, the amygdala's extensive circuitry commandeers key points throughout the brain, shepherding our thoughts, attention, and perception toward whatever has made us afraid. We instinctively become more attentive to the faces of the people around us, searching for smiles or frowns that give us a better sense of how to interpret signs of danger or that might signal someone's intentions. This increased amygdala-driven vigilance heightens our alertness to emotional cues in other people. That intensified focus, in turn, more powerfully evokes their feelings in us, lubricating contagion. And so, our moments of apprehension increase our susceptibility to another person's emotions. More generally, the amygdala acts as a radar for the brain, calling attention to whatever might be new, puzzling, or important to learn more about. The amygdala operates the brain's early warning system, scanning everything that happens, ever vigilant for emotionally salient events, especially for potential threats. While the amygdala's role as a sentinel and trigger for distress is old news to neuroscience, its social role, as part of the brain's system for emotional contagion, has been revealed only recently. The Low Road, Contagion Central. A man doctors call Patient X had suffered 2 strokes that destroyed the connections between his eyes and the rest of the brain system for sight in the visual cortex. Though his eyes could take in signals, his brain could not decipher them, nor even register their arrival. Patient X was completely blind, or so it seemed. On tests where Patient X was presented with various shapes like circles and squares, or photos of faces of men and women, he hadn't a clue what his eyes were gazing at. Yet, when he was shown pictures of people with angry or happy faces, he suddenly was able to guess the emotions expressed, at a rate far better than chance. But how? Brain scans taken while Patient X guessed the feelings revealed an alternative to the usual pathways for seeing that flow from the eyes to the thalamus, where all the senses first enter the brain, and then to the visual cortex. The second route sends information straight from the thalamus to the amygdala. The brain has a pair, right and left. The amygdala then extracts emotional meaning from the nonverbal message, whether it be a scowl, a sudden change of posture, or a shift in tone of voice, even microseconds before we yet know what we are looking at. Though the amygdala has an exquisite sensitivity for such messages, its wiring provides no direct access to the centers for speech. In this sense, the amygdala is literally speechless. When we register a feeling, signals from our brain circuits, instead of alerting the verbal areas where words can express what we know, mimic that emotion in our own bodies. So patient X was not seeing the emotions on the faces so much as feeling them, a condition called affective blindsight. In intact brains, the amygdala uses this same pathway to read the emotional aspect of whatever we perceive: elation in someone's tone of voice, a hint of anger around the eyes, a posture of glum defeat, and then processes that information subliminally, beneath the reach of conscious awareness. This reflexive, unconscious awareness signals that emotion by priming the same feeling, or a reaction to it, such as fear on seeing anger, in us, a key mechanism for catching a feeling from someone else. The fact that we can trigger any emotion at all in someone else, or they in us, testifies to the powerful mechanism by which one person's feelings spread to another. Such contagions are the central transaction in the emotional economy, the give and take of feeling that accompanies every human encounter we have, no matter what the ostensible business at hand may be. Take, for example, the cashier at a local supermarket whose upbeat patter infects each of his customers in turn. He's always getting people to laugh. Even the most doleful folks leave smiling. People like that cashier act as the emotional equivalent of Zeitgebers, those forces in nature that entrain our biological rhythms to their own pace. Such a contagion can occur with many people at one time, as visibly as when an audience mists up at a tragic movie scene, or as subtly as the tone of a meeting turning a bit testy. Though we may perceive the visible consequences of this contagion, we are largely oblivious to exactly how emotions spread. Emotional contagion exemplifies what can be called the brain's low road at work. The low road is circuitry that operates beneath our awareness, automatically and effortlessly, with immense speed. Most of what we do seems to be piloted by massive neural networks operating via the low road, particularly in our emotional life. When we are captivated by an attractive face or sense the sarcasm in a remark, we have the low road to thank. The high road, in contrast, runs through neural systems that work more methodically and step by step, with deliberate effort. We are aware of the high road, and it gives us at least some control over our inner life, which the low road denies us. As we ponder ways to approach that attractive person or search for an artful riposte to sarcasm, we take the high road. The low road can be seen as wet, dripping with emotion, and the high road as relatively dry, coolly rational. The low road traffics in raw feelings, the high in a considered understanding of what's going on. The low road lets us immediately feel with someone else. The high road can think about what we feel. Ordinarily, they mesh seamlessly. Our social lives are governed by the interplay of these two modes. An emotion can pass from person to person silently, without anyone consciously noticing, because the circuitry for this contagion lies in the low road. To oversimplify, the low road uses neural circuitry that runs through the amygdala and similar automatic nodes, while the high road sends inputs to the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, which contains our capacity for intentionality. We can think about what's happening to us. The two roads register information at very different speeds. The low road is faster than it is accurate. The high road, while slower, can help us arrive at a more accurate view of what's going on. The low road is quick and dirty. The high, slow but mindful. In the words of the 20th century philosopher John Dewey, one operates slam bang, act first, and think afterwards, while the other is more wary and observant. The speed differential between these two systems, the instant emotional one is several times faster in brain time than the more rational one, allows us to make snap decisions that we might later regret or need to justify. By the time the low road has reacted, sometimes all the high road can do is make the best of things. As the science fiction writer Robert Heinlein Riley noted, man is not a rational animal, but a rationalizing one. Mood drivers. While visiting a certain region of the country, I remember being pleasantly surprised by the friendly tones of the taped voice on the telephone that informed me, "Your call cannot be completed as dialed." The warmth in that bland recorded message, believe it or not, gave me a small trill of good feeling, due largely to my years of irritation with that same message as delivered by my own regional phone company's computerized voice back home. For some reason, the technicians who programmed that message had decided that a grating, hectoring tone hit the right note, perhaps as an immediate punishment for misdialing. I had grown to resent the obnoxious tones of that tape message. It brought to my mind the image of a too prissy, judgmental busybody. Without fail, it put me in a bad mood, if just for a moment. The emotional power of such subtle cues can be surprising. Consider a clever experiment done with student volunteers at the University of Würzburg in Germany. Students listened to a taped voice reading the driest of intellectual material, a German translation of the British philosopher David Hume's philosophical essay concerning human understanding. The tape came in two versions, either happy or sad, but so subtly inflected that people were unaware of the difference unless they explicitly listened for it. As muted as the feeling tones were, students came away from the tape either slightly happier or slightly more somber than they had been before listening to it. Yet the students had no idea that their mood had shifted, let alone why. The mood shift occurred even when the students performed a distracting task, putting metal pins into holes in a wooden board, as they listened. The distraction, it seems, created static for the high road, hampering intellectual understanding of the philosophical passage. But it did not lessen a whit how contagious the moods were. The low road stayed wide open. One way moods differ from the grosser feeling of emotions, psychologists tell us, has to do with the ineffability of their causes. While we typically know what has triggered an outright emotion, we often find ourselves in one or another mood without knowing its source. The Würzburg experiment suggests, though, that our world may be filled with mood triggers that we fail to notice. Everything from the saccharine muzak in an elevator to the sour tone in someone's voice. For instance, take the expressions we see on other people's faces. As Swedish researchers found, merely seeing a picture of a happy face elicits fleeting activity in the muscles that pull the mouth into a smile. Indeed, whenever we gaze at a photograph of someone whose face displays a strong emotion, like sadness, disgust, or joy, our facial muscles automatically start to mirror the other's facial expression. This reflexive imitation opens us to subtle emotional influences from those around us, adding one lane in what amounts to a brain-to-brain bridge between people. Particularly sensitive people pick up this contagion more readily than most, though the impervious may sail through even the most toxic encounter. In either case, this transaction usually goes on undetected. We mimic the happiness of a smiling face, pulling our own facial muscles into a subtle grin, even though we may be unaware that we have seen the smile. That mimicked slight smile might not be obvious to the naked eye, but scientists monitoring facial muscles track such emotional mirroring clearly. It's as though our face were being preset, getting ready to display the full emotion. This mimicry has a bit of biological consequence, since our facial expressions trigger within us the feelings we display. We can stir any emotion by intentionally setting our facial muscles for that feeling. Just clench a pencil in your teeth, and you'll force your face into a smile, which subtly evokes a positive feeling. Edgar Allan Poe had an intuitive grasp of this principle. He wrote, "When I wish to find out how good or how wicked anyone is, or what are his thoughts at the moment, I fashion the expression of my face as accurately as possible in accordance with the expression of his, and then wait to see what thoughts or sentiments arise in my own mind or heart, as if to match or correspond with the expression." Catching emotions. The scene, Paris, 1895. A handful of adventurous souls have ventured into an exhibition by the Lumiere brothers, pioneers in photography. For the first time in history, the brothers are presenting to the public a moving picture, a short film depicting, in utter silence, a train chugging into a station, spewing steam and charging toward the camera. The audience's reaction? They scream in terror and duck under their seats. People had never before seen pictures move. This utterly naive audience could not help but register as real the eerie specter on the screen. The most magical, powerful event in film history may well have been these very first moments in Paris, because the realization that what the eye saw was merely an illusion had not registered with any of the viewers. So far as they and their brain's perceptual system were concerned, the images on the screen were reality. As one movie critic points out, the dominating impression that this is real is a large part of the primitive power of the art form, even today. That sense of reality continues to ensnare filmgoers because the brain responds to the illusion created by the film with the same circuitry as it does to life itself. Even on-screen emotions are contagious. Some of the neural mechanisms involved in this screen-to-viewer contagion were identified by an Israeli research team who showed clips from the 1970s spaghetti western The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly to volunteers in an fMRI. In what may be the only article in the Annals of Neuroscience to acknowledge the help of Clint Eastwood, the researchers came to the conclusion that the movie played the viewer's brains like a neural puppeteer. Just as with those panicked filmgoers in 1895 Paris, the brains of the viewers in this study were acting as though the imaginary story on the screen were happening to them. The brain seems to make little initial distinction between virtual and actual realities. So when the camera swooped in for a close-up of a face, the face recognition areas in the viewer's brains lit up. When the screen showed a building or a vista, a different visual area that takes in our physical surroundings activated. When the scene depicted some delicate hand movements, the brain region governing touch and movement engaged. And at scenes with maximal excitement, gunshots, explosions, surprising plot twists, the emotional centers roared into action. In short, the movies we watch commandeer our brain. Members of an audience share this neural puppetry. Whatever happened in one viewer's brain occurred in lockstep in the others, moment by moment throughout the film. The action on screen choreographed the identical inner dance in everyone watching. As a maxim in social science holds, a thing is real if it is real in its consequences. When the brain reacts to imagined scenarios the same way it reacts to real ones, the imaginary has biological consequences. The low road takes us along for the emotional ride. The one major exception to this puppetry is the high road prefrontal areas, which house the brain's executive centers and facilitate critical thinking, including the thought, "This is just a movie," and which did not join in this coordination. And so, today, we do not run in panic as an on-screen train roars towards us, despite the fear we feel welling up inside. The more salient or striking an event, the more attention the brain deploys. Two factors that amplify the brain's responses to any virtual reality, such as a movie, are perceptual loudness and emotionally strong moments, like screaming or crying. Small wonder so many movies feature scenes of mayhem. They dazzle the brain. And the very immensity of the screen, creating monstrously huge people to watch, in itself registers as sensory loudness. Yet, moods are so contagious that we can catch a whiff of emotion from something as fleeting as a glimpse of a smile or frown, or as dry as the reading of a passage of philosophy. Radar for insincerity. Two women, complete strangers, had just watched a harrowing documentary, a film of the poignant human aftermath of the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. Both women felt deeply disturbed by what they had seen, a mix of disgust, anger, and sadness welling up inside. But when they started talking about how they felt, something strange happened. One of the women was utterly frank about her feelings of upset, while the other suppressed her emotions, feigning indifference. Indeed, it seemed to the first woman that the second woman, strangely, had no emotional reaction at all. If anything, she seemed somewhat distracted and removed. That was exactly how the conversation was meant to go. Both women were volunteers in an experiment at Stanford University on the social consequences of emotional suppression. One woman had been instructed to hide her true feelings. Understandably, the emotionally open one felt off with her partner as they talked. Indeed, she had the sense that this was someone she would not want as a friend. The one who suppressed her true feelings felt tense and ill at ease in the conversation, distracted and preoccupied. Tellingly, her blood pressure rose steadily as the conversation went on. Suppressing such disturbing feelings takes a physiological toll. Her heightened blood pressure reflected this emotional effort. But here's the big surprise. The woman who was open and honest exhibited the same steady rise in blood pressure as the one suppressing her feelings. The tension was not just palpable, but contagious. Forthrightness is the brain's default response. Our neural wiring transmits our every minor mood onto the muscles of our face, making our feelings instantly visible. The display of emotion is automatic and unconscious, and so its suppression demands conscious effort. Being devious about what we feel, trying to hide our fear or anger, demands active effort and rarely succeeds perfectly. A friend told me, for instance, that she just knew the first time they talked that she should not have trusted a man who sublet her condominium. And sure enough, the week she was to move back in, he told her he refused to move out. Meanwhile, she had no place to go herself. She faced a thicket of regulations protecting renters' rights that meant she would be homeless while her lawyer fought to get her back into her own condo. She had met the man just once, when he came to look at her condo. There was just something about him that told me he was going to be a problem, she later lamented. The something about him reflects the workings of specific high and low road circuitry that serves as our early warning system for insincerity. This circuitry, specialized for suspicion, differs from that for empathy and rapport. Its existence suggests the importance of detecting duplicity in human affairs. Evolutionary theory holds that our ability to sense when we should be suspicious has been every bit as essential for human survival as our capacity for trust and cooperation. The specific neural radar involved was revealed in a study where volunteers' brain images were taken as they watched any of several actors tell a tragic story. A strong difference emerged in the particular neural regions activated, depending on the facial expression of the actor doing the telling. If the face of the actor showed an appropriate sadness, the listener's amygdala and related circuits for sadness activated. But if the actor's face was smiling during the sad tale, an emotional mismatch, the listener's brain activated a site specializing in vigilance for social threats or conflicting information. In that case, the listeners actively disliked the person telling the story. The amygdala automatically and compulsively scans everyone we encounter for whether they are to be trusted. Is it safe to approach this guy? Is he dangerous? Can I count on him or not? Neurological patients who have extensive amygdala damage are unable to make judgments of how trustworthy someone might be. When shown a photo of a man who ordinary people find highly suspicious, these patients rate him on a par with the man others rated most deserving of their trust. Our warning system for whether we can trust someone has two branches, high and low. The high road operates when we intentionally make a judgment of whether someone might be trustworthy, but a continual amygdala-driven appraisal goes on outside our awareness, regardless of whether we consciously think about the issue. The low road labors to keep us safe. A Casanova's downfall. Giovanni Viliotto was remarkably successful as a Don Juan. His charm brought him romantic conquests one after the other. Well, not exactly one after the other. Actually, he was married to several women at the same time. No one knows with certainty how many times Viliotto wed, but he may have married 100 women over the course of his romantic career. And it did seem to be a career. Viliotto made a living by marrying wealthy women. That career crash-landed when Patricia Gardner, one of his would-be conquests, took him to court for bigamy. Just what made so many women swoon for Viliotto was hinted at during his trial. Gardner admitted that one of the things that attracted her to the charming bigamist was what she called that honest trait. He looked her directly in the eyes, smiling, even as he lied through his teeth. Like Gardner, experts on emotion read much into a person's gaze. Ordinarily, they tell us we avert our eyes downward with sadness, away with disgust, and down or away while feeling guilt or shame. Most people sense this intuitively, and so folk wisdom advises us to check if someone looks us in the eye as a gauge of whether he might be lying. Viliotto, like many a con artist, apparently knew this all too well and was skillful enough to offer a seemingly sincere locking of eyes with his romantic victims. He was onto something, but perhaps it was more about rapport building than lying, that believe what I'm saying eyelock actually reveals little about whether someone is telling us the truth, according to Paul Ekman, a world-class expert on detecting lies from a person's demeanor. In his years of studying how we express emotions in our facial muscles, Ekman became fascinated by the ways we can detect lies. His keen eye for facial subtleties detected discrepancies between the mask of a person's faked emotions and leakage of what they actually felt. The act of lying demands conscious, intentional activity in the high road, which handles the executive control systems that keep our words and deeds smoothly on track. As Ekman points out, liars pay most attention to their choice of words, censoring what they say, and less to their choice of facial expression. Such suppression of the truth takes both mental effort and time. When a person tells a lie in answering a question, he begins his response about 0.2 of a second later than does a person telling the truth. That gap signifies an effort to compose the lie well and to manage the emotional and physical channels through which truth might inadvertently leak. Successful lying takes concentration. The high road is the site for this mental effort, but attention is a limited capacity, and telling a lie demands an extra dose. This extra allocation of neural resources leaves the prefrontal area less wherewithal to perform another task, inhibiting involuntary displays of emotion that might betray that lie. Words alone may betray a lie, but more often than not, the clue that someone may be misleading us will be a discrepancy between their words and their facial expression, as when someone assures us they feel great, yet a quaver in their voice reveals angst. There is no surefire lie detector, Ekman told me, but you can detect hotspots, points where a person's emotions don't fit the words. These signs of extra mental effort call out for examination. The reasons for the glitch can range from simple nervousness to bald-faced lying. The facial muscles are controlled by the low road, the choice to lie by the high road. In an emotional lie, the face belies what's said. The high road conceals, the low road reveals. Low road circuits offer multiple lanes in the silent bridge that connect us, brain to brain. These circuits help us navigate the shoals of our relationships, detecting who to trust or avoid, or spreading good feeling infectiously. Love, power, and empathy. In the interpersonal flow of emotion, power matters. It happens in couples. One partner will make a larger emotional shift to converge with the other, the partner who has less power. Gauging relative power within a couple raises complex issues, but in a romantic relationship, power can be roughly assessed in practical terms, like which partner has more influence on how the other feels about him or herself, or which has more say in making joint decisions on matters like finances, or in making choices about the details of everyday life, like whether to go to a party. To be sure, couples tacitly negotiate which partner will have more power in what domain. One may be dominant in finances and the other in social scheduling. In the realm of emotions, however, the less powerful partner all in all makes the greater internal adjustments in their emotional convergence. Such adjustments can be better sensed if one partner in a duo intentionally takes a neutral emotional stance, as is the case in psychotherapy. Since Freud's time, psychotherapists have noticed that their own body mirrors emotions their clients are feeling. If a client cries over a painful recollection, the therapist will feel tears well up. If she is terrified by a traumatic memory, feelings of fear will stir in the pit of the therapist's stomach. Freud pointed out that attuning themselves to their own body gives psychoanalysts a window into their client's emotional world. While most anyone can detect emotions that are openly expressed, great psychotherapists go a step further, picking up emotional undertones from patients who have not even allowed these feelings into their own consciousness. Not until almost a century after Freud first noted these subtle shared sensations did researchers develop a sound method for tracking such simultaneous changes in two people's physiology during an ordinary conversation. The breakthrough came with new statistical methods and computing power that allowed scientists to analyze an immense number of data points, from heart rate and the like, during a live interaction. These studies revealed, for instance, that when a married couple argues, each partner's body tends to mimic the disturbances in the other. As the conflict progresses, they drive each other into escalating states of anger, hurt, and sadness, a scientific finding that will surprise no one. More interesting was what the marital researchers did next. They videotaped couples having arguments, then invited total strangers to watch these tapes and guess which emotions one of the partners was feeling as the argument went on. As these volunteers made their guesses, their own physiology tracked those they were watching. The more strongly a stranger's body mimicked that of a person she watched, the more accurate was her sense of what that person felt, an effect most marked for negative emotions like anger. Empathy, sensing another's emotions, seems to be as physiological as it is mental, built on sharing the inner state of the other person. This biological dance occurs when anyone empathizes with someone else. The empathizer subtly shares the physiological state of the person with whom she attunes. People whose own faces showed the strongest expressions were the most accurate at judging the feelings of others. The general principle: the more similar the physiological state of two people at a given moment, the more easily they can sense each other's feelings. When we attune ourselves to someone, we can't help but feel along with them, if only subtly. We resonate so similarly that their emotions enter us, even when we don't want them to. In short, the emotions we catch have consequences, and that gives us a good reason to understand how to shift them for the better. Chapter 2. A Recipe for Rapport. A psychotherapy session is well underway. The psychiatrist sits in a wooden armchair, stiffly formal in manner. His patient slumps on a leather couch, her very air one of defeat. They are not on the same wavelength. The psychiatrist has made a therapeutic gaffe, an off-kilter interpretation of what the patient had just said. He offers an apology. "I was concerned. I was doing something disruptive to the treatment." "No," the patient begins. The therapist cuts her off and makes another interpretation. The patient starts to reply, and the therapist just talks over her. Finally able to get a word in, the patient starts complaining about all she had to put up with over the years from her mother, a backhanded comment on what the therapist has just been doing. And so the session wobbles on, off-key and out of sync. Switch to a different patient and psychotherapist in the midst of a session at a peak moment of rapport. Patient number 2 has just told his therapist that he proposed to his longtime girlfriend, now fiancée, the day before. The therapist had spent months helping him explore and overcome his fears of intimacy in order to work up the courage to commit to marriage. So they both share in this moment of triumph. Their mood is upbeat, therapist and patient both quietly exultant. Their rapport is so thick that their posture and movements mirror each other as though intentionally choreographed. When the therapist shifts one foot and then the other, the patient immediately does the same. There's something peculiar about these two therapy sessions, both of which were captured on videotape. Two rectangular metal boxes stacked like stereo components sit between therapist and client, extruding wires that lead to a metal clip that each person wears on a fingertip. The wires to therapist and client feed a stream of readings, revealing subtle shifts in their sweat response as they speak. The sessions were part of a study of the hidden biological dance that glides along as the subterranean component of everyday interactions. The videos of the psychotherapy sessions depict those continuous readings as a wiggling line that floats under each person, blue for the patient, green for the therapist. The lines undulate with rising and falling emotions. During those anxious, jarring exchanges of the first session, the two lines move like jittery birds, their ups and downs on private trajectories. They etch a portrait of disconnection. But during the rapport of that second session, the lines fly like birds in formation, a graceful ballet of coordinated movement. When two people feel rapport, the gliding lines reveal, their very physiology attunes. These therapy sessions are at the cutting edge of methods for studying the otherwise invisible activity of the brain while people relate. Though the sweat response may seem remote from the brain, a bit of reverse engineering of the central nervous system allows us to make an educated guess as to which brain structures are doing what during these interpersonal tangos. That neural calculus was performed by Karl Marcy, a psychiatrist at Harvard Medical School, who conducted the study. lugging a suitcase filled with monitoring gear to the offices of willing therapists all over the Boston area. Marcy has joined an elect group of pioneers who are finding inventive ways to cross what was once an impenetrable barrier for brain science, the skull. Until now, neuroscience has studied just one brain at a time, but now 2 are being analyzed at once, unveiling a hitherto undreamed-of neural duet between brains as people interact. Marcy has extracted from his data what he calls a logarithm for empathy, a specific interplay of the sweat response of 2 people as they enjoy rapport. That logarithm reduces to a mathematical equation the precise pattern of 2 people's physiology at that peak of rapport when one feels understood by the other. The glow of simpatico. I remember feeling such rapport years ago in the office of Robert Rosenthal, my statistical methods professor, when I was a psychology graduate student at Harvard. Bob, as everyone called him, was by reputation just about the most likable professor in the entire department. Whenever any of us went to see Bob in his office, regardless of our reason and no matter what our anxiety was at the outset, we came out feeling heard, understood, and almost magically better. Bob had a gift for emotional uplift, but small wonder that he was so adept at spreading a mellow mood. The nonverbal links that build rapport were his scientific turf. Years later, Bob and a colleague published a landmark article revealing the basic ingredients of relationship magic, the recipe for rapport. Rapport exists only between people. We recognize it whenever a connection feels pleasant, engaged, and smooth. But rapport matters far beyond those fleeting pleasant moments. When people are in rapport, they can be more creative together and more efficient in making decisions, whether it's a couple planning a vacation itinerary or top management mapping a business strategy. Rapport feels good, generating the harmonious glow of being simpatico, a sense of friendliness where each person feels the other's warmth, understanding, and genuineness. These mutual feelings of liking strengthen the bonds between them, no matter how temporary. That special connection, Rosenthal has found, always entails 3 elements: mutual attention, shared positive feeling, and a well-coordinated nonverbal duet. As these 3 arise in tandem, we catalyze rapport. Shared attention is the first essential ingredient. As 2 people attend to what the other says and does, they generate a sense of mutual interest, a joint focus that amounts to perceptual glue. Such 2-way attention spurs shared feelings. One indicator of rapport is mutual empathy. Both partners experience being experienced. That was how we felt when talking with Bob. He was fully present to us, paying utter attention. This marks one difference between mere social ease and full rapport. In social ease, we feel comfortable, but we do not have the sense of the other person tuning into our feelings. Rosenthal cites a study where people were put in pairs. One of the 2, who was secretly working with the researchers, had what looked like a painful splintered and bandaged finger. At one point, he seemingly re-injured himself. If the other person happened to be looking the supposed victim in the eye during the injury, that person winced, mimicking his pained expression. But people who were not looking at the victim were far less likely to wince, even though they were aware of his pain. When our attention is split, we tune out a bit, missing crucial details, especially emotional ones. Seeing eye to eye opens a pathway for empathy. Attention in itself is not enough for rapport. The next ingredient is good feeling, evoked largely through tone of voice and facial expression. In building a sense of positivity, the nonverbal messages we send can matter more than what we are saying. Remarkably, in an experiment where managers gave people unflattering feedback while still exhibiting warm feelings toward them through their voice and expression, those receiving the critiques nevertheless felt positively about the overall interaction. Coordination, or synchrony, is the 3rd key ingredient for rapport in Rosenthal's formula. We coordinate most strongly via subtle nonverbal channels like the pace and timing of a conversation and our body movements. People in rapport are animated, freely expressing their emotions. Their spontaneous, immediate responsiveness has the look of a closely choreographed dance, as though the call and response of the interaction has been purposefully planned. Their eyes meet and their bodies get close, pulling chairs near. Even their noses get closer than is typical during conversation. They're comfortable with silences. Lacking coordination, a conversation will feel uncomfortable with mistimed responses or awkward pauses. People fidget or freeze. Such mismatches torpedo rapport. In sync. At a local restaurant, there's a waitress everyone loves to have serve them. She has an uncanny knack for matching the mood and pace of her customers, gliding into sync. She's quiet and discreet with the morose man nursing a drink at that table over there in the dark corner. But then she's sociable and outgoing with a noisy batch of coworkers laughing it up on their lunch hour. And for that young mom with 2 hyperactive toddlers, she wades right into the frenzy, entrancing the kids with some funny faces and jokes. Understandably, this waitress gets by far the biggest tips of any. That wavelength sensing waitress embodies the principle that getting in sync yields an interpersonal benefit. The more 2 people unconsciously synchronize their movements and mannerisms during their interaction, the more positively they will feel about their encounter and about each other. The subtle power of this dance was revealed in a clever set of experiments with students at New York University, who volunteered for what they thought was an evaluation of a new psychological test. One at a time, they sat with another student, actually a confederate of the researchers, and judged a series of photos for the supposed test. The confederate was instructed to either smile or not, to shake his foot or rub his face while they went through the pictures. Whatever the confederate did, the volunteers tended to mimic. Face rubbing elicited face rubbing. A smile primed a smile in return. But careful questioning later revealed that the volunteers had no idea they had been smiling or shaking their foot in imitation, nor had they noticed the choreographed mannerisms. In another part of the same experiment, when the confederate intentionally mimicked the motions and gestures of the person he was talking with, he was not particularly liked. But when the confederate was spontaneous in his mimicry, he was found more appealing. Contrary to the advice of popular books on the matter, intentionally matching someone, imitating the position of their arms, say, or taking on their posture, does not in itself heighten rapport. Such mechanical faked synchrony feels off. Social psychologists have found again and again that the more 2 people naturally make coupled moves, simultaneous at a similar tempo, or otherwise coordinated, the greater their positive feelings. If you watch 2 friends talking from a distance where you can't hear what they're saying, you can better observe this nonverbal flow. An elegant orchestration of their movements, smooth turn-taking, even coordination of gazes. One acting coach assigns his students to watch entire movies with the sound off to study this silent dance. A scientific lens can reveal what the naked eye can't detect. The way that, as each friend speaks, the other's breath subtly falls into a complementary rhythm. Studies where friends in conversation wore sensors that monitored breathing patterns found the listener's breathing roughly mirroring that of the speaker by inhaling as the partner exhaled, or matching by breathing together. This respiratory synchrony heightens as the moment to switch speakers approaches. And during those frequent moments of levity when close friends talk, the matchup strengthens further. Both begin laughing at virtually the same moment, and during the laughter, the rhythm of their breathing aligns remarkably. Coordination offers a social buffer during a face-to-face encounter, so long as synchrony continues via meshing of movements. An otherwise awkward conversational moment will still feel smooth. This reassuring harmonization tends to continue during rough patches like long pauses, interruptions, and simultaneous speaking. Even when a conversation frays or lapses into silence, physical synchrony maintains the sense that the interaction persists nonetheless. The synchrony telegraphs a tacit understanding or agreement between the speaker and listener. A conversation that lacks this reassuring physical synchrony has to be even smoother in its verbal coordination to feel harmonious. For example, when people cannot see each other, as in a phone call or over an intercom, their pattern of speaking and taking turns tends to become more studiedly coordinated than when they are physically present. Merely matching postures matters surprisingly in the ingredients of rapport. For instance, One study tracked postural shifts among students in a classroom. The more similar their postures were to their teachers, the more strongly they felt rapport, and the greater their overall level of involvement. In fact, posture matching may offer a quick reading of classroom atmosphere. Getting in sync can be a visceral pleasure, and the larger the group, the better. The aesthetic expression of group sync can be seen in the universal enjoyment of dancing or moving together to a beat. The same delight in mass synchronization propels arms that swing as one in a wave sweeping through a stadium. The wiring for such resonance seems built into the human nervous system. Even in the womb, infants synchronize their movements to the rhythms of human speech, though not to other sounds. 1-year-olds match the timing and duration of their baby talk to the beat of their mother speaking. Synchrony between a baby and her mother, or between two strangers meeting for the first time, sends the message, "I'm with you," an implicit, "please continue." That message maintains the involvement of the other person. As two people approach the end of their conversation, they fall out of synchrony, thereby sending the tacit signal that it's time to end their interaction. And if their interaction never gets into sync in the first place, when two people are talking over each other or otherwise fail to mesh, they create an uneasy feeling. Any conversation operates on two levels, high road and low. The high road traffics in rationality, words, and meanings, but the low expresses a free-form vitality that runs beneath the words, holding the interaction together through an immediate felt connection. The sense of connection hinges less on what's said than on the more direct and intimate unspoken emotional link. This subterranean connection should be no mystery. We always display our feelings about things through spontaneous facial expressions, gestures, gaze, and the like. At that subtle level, we carry on a constant silent chatter, a kind of thinking aloud that offers a between-the-lines narrative, letting the other person know how we feel from moment to moment and so adjust accordingly. Whenever two people converse, we can see this emotional minuet being played out in the dance of flashing eyebrows, rapid hand gestures, fleeting facial expressions, swiftly adjusted word pacing, shifts of gaze, and the like. Such synchrony lets us mesh and connect, and if we do so well, feel a positive emotional resonance with the other person. The more synchrony occurs, the more alike the emotions both partners will feel. Getting in sync creates an emotional match. For instance, as a baby and mother move in tandem from a low level of energy and alertness to a higher one, their shared pleasure steadily heightens. The variability to resonate in this way, even in babies, points to an underlying wiring in the brain that makes all this synchrony so natural.